The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the small airport tucked away in a quiet town. The crew of Flight 227 was preparing for their evening journey, a routine trip they had done countless times. The team consisted of a seasoned pilot, a co-pilot with a sharp tongue, and a group of flight attendants who were more like a close-knit family. They were known for their camaraderie, but also for their habit of poking fun at each other, and sometimes, at others. That evening, as the crew gathered near the plane, their attention turned to a man who had just arrived at the airport. He was unassuming, dressed in simple clothes, and carried a small, worn-out bag. He looked out of place among the polished crew and the sleek aircraft. The man was a last-minute addition to the flight, a passenger who had been bumped from another plane due to overbooking. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his boarding pass and glancing around as if he didn't belong. The co-pilot, always quick with a joke, nudged one of the flight attendants and nodded toward the man. "Looks like we've got a real pro traveler here," he said with a smirk. The others chuckled, their laughter carrying across the tarmac. The man noticed their glances and awkwardly smiled back, unaware that he had become the target of their jokes. As the passengers began boarding, the crew continued their light-hearted teasing. One of the flight attendants mimicked the man's nervous walk, earning more laughter from the group. Even the pilot, usually more reserved, couldn't help but join in. "Hope he doesn't try to fly the plane himself," he quipped, causing another round of giggles. The man, now seated in the back of the plane, seemed to shrink into his seat. He avoided eye contact with the crew as they walked by, focusing instead on the safety card in front of him. The crew, meanwhile, continued their banter in the galley, unaware of how their words might be affecting him. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, the mood among the crew was light. They joked about the man's nervousness, imagining all sorts of ridiculous scenarios. "What if he thinks the seatbelt is a parachute?" one of them joked, causing another burst of laughter. They were so caught up in their fun that they didn't notice the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The flight was smooth at first, the hum of the engines lulling some passengers to sleep. The crew moved about the cabin, serving drinks and snacks, their earlier teasing forgotten. But as the plane entered a patch of turbulence, the mood began to shift. The seatbelt signs flickered on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some rough air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The turbulence grew stronger, shaking the plane and rattling the overhead bins. Passengers gripped their armrests, their faces pale with fear. The crew, trained to handle such situations, moved quickly to ensure everyone was safe. But as the plane jolted violently, a loud bang echoed through the cabin, followed by a sudden loss of pressure. The oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, and the passengers scrambled to put them on. The crew, now fully focused on their duties, moved swiftly to assist those in need. But as they worked, they noticed something unusual. The man they had mocked earlier was no longer in his seat. He was moving toward the front of the plane, his face calm but determined. The co-pilot, seeing the man approaching, tried to stop him. "Sir, you need to return to your seat immediately," he shouted over the noise. But the man ignored him, continuing toward the cockpit. The crew exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to do. Was this man a threat? Or was there something else going on? As the man reached the cockpit door, he turned to the co-pilot and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "I'm a retired aircraft engineer. I think I can help." The co-pilot hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let the man in. The pilot, struggling to control the plane, glanced up in surprise as the man entered. Without a word, the man took a seat and began examining the controls. The crew watched in stunned silence as the man worked, his hands moving with precision and confidence. He identified the problem quickly, a malfunction in the plane's pressurization system, and began making adjustments. Within minutes, the plane stabilized, and the cabin pressure returned to normal. The passengers, still shaken but relieved, began to relax. The pilot, his hands still gripping the controls, turned to the man with a look of gratitude. "You just saved this flight," he said, his voice filled with awe. The man simply nodded, his face calm and composed. The crew, who had mocked him just hours earlier, now looked at him with a mix of respect and guilt. As the plane continued its journey, the mood in the cabin was somber. The crew, once so quick to laugh at others, now found themselves reflecting on their behavior. They realized that their jokes, meant to be harmless, had been hurtful and unfair. The man, who had every reason to hold a grudge, had instead chosen to help them in their moment of need. The flight landed safely, and the passengers disembarked, grateful to be back on solid ground. The crew, however, lingered behind, gathering near the man as he prepared to leave. The co-pilot, his earlier arrogance gone, stepped forward and extended his hand. "I'm sorry," he said simply. The man shook his hand, a small smile on his face. "We all have our moments," he replied. As the man walked away, the crew stood in silence, each lost in their thoughts. They had learned a valuable lesson that day, one they would not soon forget. And though they would continue to joke and laugh in the future, they would do so with a newfound respect for those around them. The crew of Flight 227 stood on the tarmac, watching as the man who had saved their flight disappeared into the bustling airport. The weight of what had just happened hung heavily in the air. The jokes they had made earlier now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a deep sense of guilt and admiration. The co-pilot, who had been the most vocal in his teasing, couldn't shake the image of the man's calm demeanor as he stepped into the cockpit and took control of the situation. It was a moment that would stay with him for a long time. The pilot, a man of few words, broke the silence. "Let's get the plane checked and debrief. We've got a lot to process." The crew nodded, their usual banter replaced by a quiet seriousness. As they went through the post-flight procedures, each of them couldn't help but replay the events in their minds. The man they had mocked had not only saved the flight but had also taught them a lesson in humility. Later that evening, the crew gathered in a small diner near the airport. It was their usual spot after a long flight, but the atmosphere was different this time. The usual laughter and jokes were absent, replaced by thoughtful silence. Finally, one of the flight attendants spoke up. "Do you think he'll report us? I mean, we weren't exactly professional." The co-pilot sighed, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know. But if he does, we deserve it. We acted like idiots." The others nodded in agreement. The pilot, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward. "We can't change what happened, but we can learn from it. That man didn't just save the flight, he showed us what real professionalism looks like. We owe him more than an apology." The conversation continued, each crew member sharing their thoughts and regrets. They realized that their behavior wasn't just harmless fun, it had the potential to hurt others and create a toxic environment. The man's actions had been a wake-up call, a reminder that everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look or act. Meanwhile, the man who had saved the flight was making his way through the airport. He had no intention of reporting the crew or causing any trouble. For him, helping others was second nature, something he had done his entire life. He had spent decades working as an aircraft engineer, solving problems and ensuring the safety of countless flights. Retirement hadn't changed that, it had just given him more time to reflect on the importance of kindness and humility. As he waited for his connecting flight, he noticed a young family struggling with their luggage. The parents looked exhausted, and their children were crying. Without hesitation, he walked over and offered to help. The family was grateful, and as they chatted, the man couldn't help but smile. It was moments like these that reminded him why he had chosen his profession in the first place. Back at the diner, the crew of Flight 227 was wrapping up their conversation. They had made a decision, they would try to find the man and thank him properly. They didn't know his name or where he was going, but they were determined to make things right. The co-pilot, who had been the most vocal in his regret, volunteered to lead the effort. "We'll start with the passenger manifest," he said. "Maybe we can track him down." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity for the crew. Between their regular flights, they spent hours trying to locate the man. They reached out to the airline's customer service, checked security footage, and even posted on social media. It wasn't easy, but they were determined. Finally, after days of searching, they got a break. One of the flight attendants recognized the man from a photo shared by a fellow crew member. He had been on another flight, heading to a small town a few hours away. The crew decided to take a day off and make the trip together. It was a long drive, but none of them minded. They spent the time reflecting on what they had learned and how they could be better moving forward. When they finally arrived in the town, they asked around and eventually found the man's address. He lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees and quiet streets. As they stood at his doorstep, the crew felt a mix of nerves and excitement. The co-pilot took a deep breath and knocked on the door. After a few moments, the man opened it, his expression one of mild surprise. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. The co-pilot stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Sir, we're the crew from Flight 227. We came to thank you for what you did. And to apologize for how we acted." The man looked at them for a moment, then smiled. "You didn't have to come all this way," he said. "But I appreciate it. Come on in." The crew followed him inside, where they spent the next few hours talking and sharing stories. The man told them about his career as an aircraft engineer, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. The crew, in turn, shared their own experiences and how his actions had changed their perspective. It was a heartfelt conversation, one that left them all feeling a sense of closure and gratitude. As they prepared to leave, the man walked them to the door. "Remember," he said, "we all have our moments. What matters is what we do with them." The crew nodded, each of them carrying those words with them as they made their way back to the car. The drive home was quiet, but the atmosphere was different this time. There was a sense of peace, a feeling that they had taken a step toward becoming better people. They knew that the journey wasn't over, that there would be more challenges and lessons ahead, but they were ready to face them with a newfound sense of respect and humility. And as they returned to their lives, the crew of Flight 227 carried with them the memory of the man who had saved their flight, and, in doing so, had saved them from themselves. The crew of Flight 227 returned to their routines, but something had shifted. The experience with the retired engineer had left a lasting impression on each of them. They were more mindful of their words and actions, more aware of the impact they could have on others. The co-pilot, who had once been quick to mock, now found himself pausing before speaking, considering how his words might affect those around him. The flight attendants, too, were more attentive to the passengers, offering smiles and assistance without judgment. The pilot, who had always been a quiet leader, noticed the change in his team. He decided to address it during one of their pre-flight briefings. "I've seen a lot of growth in this crew over the past few weeks," he began. "What happened on Flight 227 was a wake-up call for all of us. Let's keep that spirit alive. Let's be the kind of crew that people remember for the right reasons." The team nodded in agreement, their resolve strengthened. They knew that their journey wasn't just about flying planes, it was about being better human beings. And as they took to the skies day after day, they carried that lesson with them. Meanwhile, the retired engineer had returned to his quiet life in the small town. He didn't think much about the incident on Flight 227, it was just another moment in a lifetime of helping others. But the visit from the crew had touched him deeply. He hadn't expected them to come all that way to thank him, and their sincerity had left a lasting impression. One afternoon, as he was tending to his garden, he received a phone call. It was from an old colleague, someone he had worked with during his years as an aircraft engineer. "We're putting together a training program for new engineers," the colleague said. "We'd love for you to be a part of it. Your experience and wisdom would be invaluable." The man hesitated. He had been enjoying his retirement, the quiet days and simple routines. But the idea of sharing his knowledge with the next generation was appealing. After a moment, he agreed. "I'll do it," he said. "But on one condition: we focus not just on the technical skills, but on the importance of humility and respect." The colleague laughed. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you." And so, the retired engineer found himself back in the world of aviation, this time as a mentor. He spent his days teaching young engineers the intricacies of aircraft systems, but he also shared stories from his career, stories of challenges overcome, mistakes made, and lessons learned. He emphasized the importance of treating everyone with respect, from the pilots to the ground crew to the passengers. One day, during a training session, he decided to share the story of Flight 227. He told the young engineers about the crew who had mocked him, and how they had later come to thank him. "It's easy to judge others," he said. "But you never know what someone is capable of. Everyone has something to offer, and it's our job to recognize that." The young engineers listened intently, their respect for the man growing with each word. They realized that being a great engineer wasn't just about technical expertise, it was about character, about how you treated others and how you handled challenges. Back at the airline, the crew of Flight 227 continued to thrive. Their newfound attitude had not gone unnoticed. Passengers began to compliment the airline on the exceptional service, and the crew received letters of thanks from people who had felt seen and valued during their flights. The co-pilot, who had once been known for his sharp tongue, now found himself receiving praise for his kindness and professionalism. One day, the crew was assigned to a special flight, a charity mission to deliver supplies to a remote area hit by a natural disaster. It was a challenging assignment, with difficult weather conditions and limited resources. But the crew was determined to make a difference. As they prepared for the flight, the pilot gathered the team for a briefing. "This is going to be tough," he said. "But we've faced challenges before, and we've come out stronger. Let's remember why we're doing this: to help those in need. Let's make them proud." The crew nodded, their determination evident. They loaded the plane with supplies, working together seamlessly. As they took off, the mood was focused but hopeful. They knew that this flight was about more than just delivering supplies, it was about making a difference, about being the kind of people who stepped up when it mattered. The flight was rough, with strong winds and heavy rain. But the crew remained calm, their training and experience guiding them through. When they finally landed in the remote area, they were greeted by a crowd of grateful faces. The crew worked tirelessly to unload the supplies, their exhaustion overshadowed by the joy of helping others. As they prepared to leave, a young boy approached the co-pilot. "Thank you," he said, his eyes wide with gratitude. The co-pilot knelt down, smiling. "You're welcome," he replied. "We're just glad we could help." The boy handed him a small drawing, a picture of a plane flying over a rainbow. The co-pilot felt a lump in his throat as he took it. "This means a lot," he said. "Thank you." The crew returned to the plane, their hearts full. They knew that this flight would stay with them for the rest of their lives, a reminder of why they had chosen this path. As they took off, the co-pilot looked at the drawing in his hands, a symbol of hope and gratitude. The retired engineer, watching the news that evening, saw a report about the charity flight. He smiled as he recognized the crew of Flight 227, knowing that they had taken his lesson to heart. He felt a sense of pride, knowing that his actions had inspired others to be better. And as the crew flew back home, they knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to make a difference. But they were ready, armed with the knowledge that kindness and respect could change lives, and that they had the power to be the change. The charity flight had left a profound impact on the crew of Flight 227. They returned to their base with a renewed sense of purpose, their bond stronger than ever. The co-pilot, who had once been the ringleader of their mocking humor, now found himself reflecting on how far they had come. The drawing from the young boy was pinned to the wall of his small apartment, a daily reminder of the good they could do when they worked together with kindness and respect. The crew's reputation began to grow within the airline. Other teams noticed the change in their demeanor and the positive feedback they were receiving from passengers. Soon, the pilot was asked to lead a workshop on teamwork and professionalism. At first, he hesitated. "I'm not much of a speaker," he admitted to the crew. But they encouraged him, reminding him of the lessons they had learned and how sharing their story could inspire others. The workshop was a success. The pilot spoke openly about their experience on Flight 227, the mistakes they had made, and how they had grown from them. He emphasized the importance of humility, respect, and the power of second chances. The room was silent as he spoke, his words resonating with everyone present. By the end of the session, many of the attendees approached him, thanking him for his honesty and sharing their own stories of growth and redemption. Meanwhile, the retired engineer continued his work as a mentor, shaping the next generation of aircraft engineers. His story about Flight 227 became a cornerstone of his teachings, a real-life example of the importance of character and integrity. One day, after a particularly inspiring session, one of the young engineers approached him. "Sir," she said, "your story made me realize that this job isn't just about fixing planes. It's about being someone people can count on." "Thank you." The man smiled, touched by her words. "That's exactly it," he replied. "We're all part of something bigger. Never forget that." As the weeks passed, the ripple effect of the crew's transformation began to spread. Other crews within the airline started to adopt their approach, focusing on kindness and respect. The airline's management took notice, and soon, the pilot was invited to speak at a company-wide event. It was a daunting prospect, but he accepted, knowing that their story had the power to make a difference. The event was held in a large conference hall, filled with employees from all levels of the company. The pilot stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. He took a deep breath and began to speak. He talked about the crew's journey, the mistakes they had made, and the lessons they had learned. He spoke about the retired engineer who had saved their flight and the impact he had on their lives. And he talked about the charity flight, the young boy's drawing, and the joy of making a difference. The room was silent, every person hanging on his words. When he finished, there was a moment of stillness before the room erupted into applause. The pilot stepped down from the podium, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He had shared their story, and in doing so, had inspired others to be better. After the event, the pilot was approached by a senior executive. "That was incredible," the executive said. "We'd like to make your story part of our official training program. Your crew's journey is a powerful example of what we stand for as a company." The pilot was stunned. "Thank you," he said. "We're just glad we could make a difference." The executive smiled. "You've done more than that. You've shown us all what's possible when we focus on what truly matters." As the pilot returned to his crew, he shared the news. They were thrilled, but also humbled. They knew that their journey was far from over, and that there would always be more to learn. But they were ready, armed with the knowledge that their actions could inspire others and create positive change. The retired engineer, watching the news that evening, saw a report about the airline's event. He smiled as he recognized the pilot, knowing that their story was now reaching even more people. He felt a sense of pride, knowing that his actions had sparked a chain reaction of kindness and respect. And as the crew of Flight 227 prepared for their next flight, they knew that they were part of something bigger. They were not just a crew, they were a team, a family, and a force for good. They had learned that every action, no matter how small, could have a ripple effect, touching lives in ways they could never have imagined. As the plane took off, the co-pilot glanced at the drawing pinned to the wall of the cockpit. He smiled, knowing that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to make a difference. But they were ready, armed with the knowledge that kindness and respect could change lives, and that they had the power to be the change. The crew of Flight 227 had become something of a legend within the airline. Their story of growth, humility, and redemption had inspired countless others, and their reputation for professionalism and kindness was unmatched. But as they continued their work, they knew that their journey was far from over. Life had a way of testing even the strongest of characters, and their next challenge was just around the corner. It was a routine flight, or so it seemed. The crew had been assigned to a long-haul journey, one that would take them across the ocean to a bustling international city. The passengers were a mix of business travelers, families, and tourists, all eager to reach their destination. The crew went through their usual pre-flight checks, their movements smooth and practiced. But as they prepared for takeoff, the pilot noticed something unusual on the weather radar, a storm system that hadn't been there earlier. He called the co-pilot over, pointing to the screen. "This looks like it's developing fast," he said, his brow furrowed. The co-pilot nodded, his usual humor replaced by seriousness. "We'll keep an eye on it," he replied. "But we should be able to navigate around it." The plane took off without incident, the crew focused and alert. But as they reached cruising altitude, the storm system began to intensify. Turbulence shook the plane, and the seatbelt signs flickered on. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some rough air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The crew moved through the cabin, reassuring passengers and ensuring everyone was safe. But as the turbulence grew worse, the pilot realized they wouldn't be able to avoid the storm. He made the decision to divert to a nearby airport, a small facility that wasn't equipped to handle large planes. It was a risky move, but he knew it was the safest option. As the plane descended, the crew prepared for an emergency landing. The co-pilot worked closely with the pilot, their communication seamless. The flight attendants moved quickly, securing the cabin and calming the passengers. It was a tense moment, but the crew's training and experience guided them through. The landing was rough, but the plane touched down safely. The passengers erupted into applause, their relief palpable. The crew, though exhausted, felt a sense of accomplishment. They had faced a difficult situation and handled it with professionalism and grace. But their challenges weren't over yet. The small airport was ill-equipped to handle the sudden arrival of a large plane and its passengers. The crew worked tirelessly, coordinating with airport staff to ensure everyone was taken care of. They arranged for food and water, helped passengers contact their loved ones, and even entertained the children with stories and games. As the hours passed, the crew's dedication and kindness shone through. Passengers who had been anxious and frustrated now felt reassured, their trust in the crew unwavering. One elderly woman approached the co-pilot, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "You've been so kind. I was so scared, but you made me feel safe." The co-pilot smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "We're just doing our job," he replied. "But thank you. Your words mean a lot." Meanwhile, the pilot was in constant communication with the airline, arranging for a replacement plane and coordinating the next steps. It was a logistical nightmare, but he remained calm and focused, his leadership guiding the team through the chaos. As the replacement plane finally arrived, the crew prepared to continue their journey. But before they boarded, the passengers gathered to thank them. One by one, they expressed their gratitude, their words filled with sincerity. The crew, though exhausted, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had faced a test of character and had come out stronger. The flight to their original destination was smooth, the storm now far behind them. As the plane touched down, the crew felt a sense of relief. They had faced a difficult situation and had handled it with professionalism, kindness, and respect. It was a reminder of how far they had come and the importance of their work. Back at their base, the crew gathered for a debriefing. The pilot looked at his team, his expression one of pride. "You all did an incredible job," he said. "We faced a tough situation, and you handled it with grace and professionalism. I'm proud to be part of this crew." The co-pilot nodded, his usual humor replaced by seriousness. "We've come a long way," he said. "But we couldn't have done it without each other. We're a team, and that's what got us through." The flight attendants smiled, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had faced a test of character and had come out stronger, their commitment to kindness and respect unwavering. As they left the debriefing room, the co-pilot glanced at the drawing from the young boy, now pinned to the wall of the crew lounge. He smiled, knowing that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to make a difference. But they were ready, armed with the knowledge that kindness and respect could change lives, and that they had the power to be the change. The crew of Flight 227 had faced their fair share of challenges, but each one had only strengthened their bond and deepened their commitment to kindness and professionalism. They had become a symbol of what it meant to be a team, not just within their airline but across the industry. Passengers requested to fly with them, and other crews looked to them for inspiration. Yet, despite their growing reputation, they remained humble, always remembering the lessons they had learned. One morning, as the crew gathered for their pre-flight briefing, they were informed of a special assignment. They had been chosen to operate a humanitarian flight to a region devastated by a recent earthquake. The mission was urgent, delivering medical supplies, food, and clean water to those in need. It was a high-stakes operation, with limited resources and unpredictable conditions on the ground. The pilot, as always, took charge of the briefing. "This won't be like our usual flights," he said, his voice steady but serious. "The area we're heading to is still unstable. The runway is damaged, and communication with the ground team is spotty. But this is exactly the kind of mission we've been training for. We've got the skills, the experience, and the teamwork to make this happen. Let's do our best to help those who need it most." The crew nodded, their determination evident. They knew this mission would test them in new ways, but they were ready. As they loaded the plane with supplies, they worked with precision and care, ensuring everything was secure. The atmosphere was focused but hopeful, they were about to make a real difference. The flight itself was smooth, but as they approached the disaster zone, the mood grew tense. The pilot and co-pilot carefully navigated the damaged runway, their communication crisp and efficient. The plane touched down safely, but the scene that greeted them was heartbreaking. Buildings were reduced to rubble, and people wandered the streets, their faces etched with despair. The crew quickly got to work, coordinating with the ground team to unload the supplies. They moved with urgency but also compassion, offering smiles and words of encouragement to those they encountered. One of the flight attendants noticed a young girl sitting alone near the edge of the runway. She approached gently, crouching down to the girl's level. "Hi there," she said softly. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "My family. I can't find them," she whispered. The flight attendant's heart ached. She took the girl's hand and led her to the ground team, who promised to help her find her family. It was a small gesture, but it reminded the crew why they were there, to bring hope to those who had lost so much. As the hours passed, the crew worked tirelessly, distributing supplies and assisting wherever they could. The co-pilot, who had once been quick to mock, now found himself comforting a grieving father. The pilot, usually reserved, worked side by side with the ground team, his leadership inspiring everyone around him. The flight attendants, though exhausted, continued to offer kindness and support, their energy unwavering. By the time the crew prepared to leave, they were physically and emotionally drained. But as they boarded the plane, they felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had faced a new challenge and had risen to the occasion, their commitment to helping others stronger than ever. The flight back was quiet, the crew lost in their thoughts. The co-pilot broke the silence. "That was intense," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But I'm glad we were able to help. It makes you realize how much we take for granted." The pilot nodded. "It's easy to forget how fragile life can be. But today, we made a difference. That's what matters." The flight attendants exchanged glances, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had faced a new test and had come out stronger, their commitment to kindness and respect unwavering. As the plane touched down at their home base, the crew was greeted by their colleagues, who had heard about their mission. There were hugs, handshakes, and words of praise, but the crew remained humble. They knew that their work was about more than recognition, it was about making a difference, one flight at a time. Later that evening, as the crew gathered for a debriefing, the pilot looked at his team with pride. "You all did an incredible job today," he said. "We faced a difficult situation, and you handled it with grace and professionalism. I'm proud to be part of this crew." The co-pilot smiled, his usual humor replaced by sincerity. "We've come a long way," he said. "But we couldn't have done it without each other. We're a team, and that's what got us through." The flight attendants nodded, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had faced a new test and had come out stronger, their commitment to kindness and respect unwavering. As they left the debriefing room, the co-pilot glanced at the drawing from the young boy, now pinned to the wall of the crew lounge. He smiled, knowing that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to make a difference. But they were ready, armed with the knowledge that kindness and respect could change lives, and that they had the power to be the change. The humanitarian mission had left an indelible mark on the crew of Flight 227. They returned to their regular duties with a renewed sense of purpose, their bond stronger than ever. The experience had reminded them of the importance of their work and the impact they could have on the lives of others. But as they continued their journey, they knew that their story was far from over. Life had a way of presenting new challenges, and their next test was just around the corner. One morning, as the crew gathered for their pre-flight briefing, they were informed of a special assignment. They had been chosen to operate a flight for a group of young aspiring pilots and flight attendants. These were students from underprivileged backgrounds who had been given the opportunity to experience a real flight and learn about the aviation industry. It was a chance to inspire the next generation, and the crew was honored to be part of it. The pilot, as always, took charge of the briefing. "This is a unique opportunity," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "These kids look up to us. Let's show them what it means to be part of this industry. Let's inspire them to dream big and work hard." The crew nodded, their excitement evident. They knew that this flight was about more than just flying, it was about making a difference in the lives of these young people. As they prepared for the flight, they discussed how they could make the experience memorable. The co-pilot suggested giving the students a behind-the-scenes look at the cockpit, while the flight attendants planned to share stories about their careers and the importance of teamwork. When the students arrived at the airport, their faces were filled with awe and excitement. They were a diverse group, each with their own dreams and aspirations. The crew greeted them warmly, their kindness and professionalism immediately putting the students at ease. As they boarded the plane, the students chattered excitedly, their enthusiasm contagious. The flight itself was smooth, but the real magic happened in the air. The co-pilot invited a few students to the cockpit, where he explained the controls and answered their questions. The pilot shared stories about his journey to becoming a captain, emphasizing the importance of perseverance and hard work. The flight attendants, meanwhile, moved through the cabin, engaging with the students and sharing their own experiences. One student, a quiet girl with a passion for engineering, approached the co-pilot after the cockpit tour. "I've always wanted to work on planes," she said shyly. "But I didn't think someone like me could do it." The co-pilot smiled, his usual humor replaced by sincerity. "You can do anything you set your mind to," he said. "It's not about where you start, it's about where you're willing to go. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The girl's eyes lit up, her confidence growing. "Thank you," she said. "I'll remember that." As the flight continued, the crew's impact on the students became evident. The once quiet group was now buzzing with excitement, their dreams fueled by the crew's encouragement. When the plane touched down, the students erupted into applause, their gratitude palpable. The crew, though exhausted, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had inspired a group of young people, showing them that their dreams were within reach. As they disembarked, the students approached the crew, thanking them for the experience. One boy, who had been particularly shy, handed the pilot a small note. "Thank you for believing in us," it read. "You've changed my life." The pilot felt a lump in his throat as he read the note. He looked at his team, his pride evident. "We've done something special today," he said. "Let's keep this spirit alive." The crew nodded, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had faced a new test and had come out stronger, their commitment to kindness and respect unwavering. As they left the airport, the co-pilot glanced at the drawing from the young boy, now pinned to the wall of the crew lounge. He smiled, knowing that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to make a difference. But they were ready, armed with the knowledge that kindness and respect could change lives, and that they had the power to be the change. The crew of Flight 227 had come a long way since the day they had mocked the unassuming passenger who would later save their flight. That moment had been a turning point, a catalyst for change that had transformed not only their professional lives but also their personal ones. They had faced countless challenges, each one teaching them new lessons about humility, kindness, and the power of teamwork. Now, as they stood on the brink of a new chapter, they reflected on how far they had come and the legacy they hoped to leave behind. One evening, the crew gathered at their favorite diner, a place that had become a sanctuary for their post-flight debriefs and heartfelt conversations. The atmosphere was warm and familiar, the clinking of cutlery and the hum of conversation creating a comforting backdrop. The pilot, usually a man of few words, broke the silence. "We've been through a lot together," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I think it's time we think about what we want our legacy to be." The co-pilot, who had once been quick to mock but now led with compassion, nodded. "We've inspired a lot of people, passengers, colleagues, even those kids on the last flight. But I think we can do more. We've got the experience and the platform to make a real difference." The flight attendants, who had become the heart and soul of the crew, exchanged glances. One of them spoke up. "What if we started a mentorship program? Something that helps young people, especially those from underprivileged backgrounds, get into aviation. We could share our stories, offer guidance, and maybe even sponsor scholarships." The idea sparked excitement around the table. They had all seen the impact they could have on others, and the thought of creating something lasting was incredibly appealing. The pilot smiled, his pride in his team evident. "That's a fantastic idea," he said. "Let's make it happen." Over the next few weeks, the crew poured their energy into creating the mentorship program. They reached out to their airline, local schools, and aviation organizations, gathering support and resources. They shared their story at industry events, inspiring others to join their cause. The response was overwhelming. people were eager to be part of something that promoted kindness, respect, and opportunity. The program, which they named Wings of Hope, officially launched with a ceremony at the airline's headquarters. The crew stood on stage, their hearts swelling with pride as they addressed the crowd. The pilot spoke first, his voice filled with conviction. "This program is about more than just aviation," he said. "It's about giving people the tools they need to succeed, no matter where they start. It's about showing them that kindness and respect can open doors." The co-pilot stepped forward, his usual humor replaced by sincerity. "We've learned a lot over the years," he said. "And the most important lesson is this: everyone has something to offer. Our job is to help them see that." The flight attendants, who had worked tirelessly to organize the event, shared their own stories. They spoke about the passengers who had touched their lives, the challenges they had overcome, and the joy of making a difference. Their words resonated with the audience, many of whom were moved to tears. As the ceremony concluded, the crew was approached by a young woman who had been part of the group of students they had flown with months earlier. She had been inspired by their kindness and had since enrolled in an aviation program. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've changed my life. And now, with this program, you're going to change so many more." The crew felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had come full circle, from a group of individuals who had once mocked others to a team that was now changing lives. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. As they left the event, the co-pilot glanced at the drawing from the young boy, now framed and hanging in the crew lounge. He smiled, knowing that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to make a difference. But they were ready, armed with the knowledge that kindness and respect could change lives, and that they had the power to be the change. The legacy of Flight 227 was no longer just about a single flight or a single crew. It was about the ripple effect of their actions, the lives they had touched, and the hope they had inspired. And as they took to the skies day after day, they carried that legacy with them, knowing that they were part of something bigger, a movement of kindness, respect, and endless possibility.